this there's so the other day I was at a bar here in Mexico and there was a cat and we were talking and he had been in Costa Rica and he was telling me that Costa Rica was communist. I was like, no, it's not. He goes, well, yes, it is. I was like, no, it's not. He goes, well, it's Latin America. It's like, yeah, there's no communist nations there from my understanding. And he was like, come on, man. The healthcare. What about it? Yeah.
They don't even have an army.
Yeah, that didn't matter. They're just, So to be in that world like hardcore like that, we have to go on Fox News and then say horrible shit about black people all the time. Oof. Oof. I can't.
You get invited to those retreats that they have, those like private retreats where they celebrate the legacy of Calvin Coolidge or whatever bullshit.
And it's just an orgy.
Yeah, the worst orgy I've ever seen in my life. Yeah,
I could. I would laugh way too much. Pascal, I know you have a serious question to follow up with.
Yes, let's go to the questions. In the Ecuadorian candidate, we see Arius attempt to unite various left factions, but some alliances seem fraught with tension. Can you talk about the political divides within the Ecuadorian left and how Arius navigated those elite challenges during this campaign?
Oh, great question. You will not be surprised to learn that in Ecuador, as in various other places, there was a lot of factionalism within the left, and I think the broad divide on the Ecuadorian left can be described as a conflict between a more developmentalist left, a more kind of economically based developmentalist left, which was really embodied by the presidency of Rafael Correa, who was a very successful president in Ecuador. He kind of rode in on the pink tide, kind of very much in the Hugo Chavez mold. Incredibly charismatic man, incredibly combative as well. Wasn't afraid to take on his enemies head on. Became a kind of boogeyman in the United States, and was a but was a very popular leader for his time in office. Really much focused on a economically developmental program that often meant being quite extractivist. Ecuador, as a lot of Latin America, is very rich in mining and things like that, and his program was about standing up to neoliberalism and have the proceeds of the extraction go to the Ecuadorian people rather than bankers on Wall Street, for lack of a better term. And this inspired some opposition from indigenous groups within Ecuador. And one of the leaders of the indigenous opposition was a man named Jacobin, who ran a challenging left-wing program around the indigenous organization called CONAI, and was an opponent of Arauz in the first round of the elections. And I don't want to oversimplify it in that it was just indigenous people versus non-indigenous people, because plenty of indigenous people voted for Arauz and supported Arauz. But there was a significant enough opposition that there's no other way to say it, that they functioned as kind of wreckers and allowed the right wing to win the general election. I mean, that's just the only way to say it. And Jacobin is I would say his left wing bona fides are suspect, especially in the context of Latin America. I mean, he supported the coup against Evo Morales in Bolivia. I remind people, Evo Morales was the first indigenous leader ever elected in Latin America, and was basically removed from power in a legislative coup, which Jacobin has supported. And Jacobin has also supported the coup against Dilma Rousseff in Brazil. So, it's not. It did not see himself as part of a broader Latin American left. and yeah. So it was I think probably the major reason why Andres Arauz lost in the general election.
Now, you were there for a little bit of the filming as well?
No, I didn't go on the ground. I was remote, and we sent the filmmaker Hector, and he was sending back footage from the ground,
And you
and then
guys were
we worked together on the post production and the editing, which is really where where documentaries are really come together is in the editing.
And he got tons of footage from the indigenous side of things. But you've spent time, or have you spent time in certain parts
Yes,
of America?
yes, of course,
Um,
and Ecuador, and yeah.
Is there racism towards the indigenous in Ecuador?
Of course, yes, certainly.
Does that play into their kind of skepticism on wanting to work with even a left-wing party?
It's definitely part. It's definitely part of it. It obviously pales in comparison with the racism that comes from the white elite, the sort of white right wing elite and business leaders of Ecuador, as is in the rest of Latin America. I mean, the dynamic in Ecuador is not dissimilar to other countries in Latin America, in which there is a kind of white elite that own everything. Then there is a kind of mestizo population that forms a large part of the working class, and then indigenous groups who are subject to all manner of harassment and abuse, and especially on their tribal lands and all that stuff. And Ecuador is famously where Stephen Donziger won the case against Chevron for just a comical polluting of of tribal land. So that dynamic is definitely there. But I think that the kind of undercurrent of that is really about the debate about whether extraction should continue even as a kind of developmental thing to help the people of the country, whether that's okay or not.